The moment you feel broke, really broke, not just cash light, but genuinely worried, something happens in your brain that most financial advice never accounts for. And here is the strange part. The science that supposedly proves this might be telling us something almost opposite to what it claims. There is a compelling story that has taken hold in popular psychology and personal finance circles over the last decade. It goes like this. Financial scarcity hijacks your brain. When money is tight, chronic stress floods your system with cortisol. That cortisol impairs the prefrontal cortex, the region most responsible for planning, impulse control, and long-term reasoning. So the people who most need to make good financial decisions are, by cruel neurological irony, the least equipped to make them. The implication is almost poetic in its tragedy. Poverty is not just a lack of money, it is a cognitive tax. The mental bandwidth consumed by financial worry leaves less room for everything else. For thinking clearly, for resisting temptation, for making the kind of patient, strategic decisions that build financial stability over time. This idea spread quickly. It appeared in TED Talks. It shaped policy conversations. It influenced how some researchers think about poverty interventions. And the neuroscience behind it is not invented. Chronic stress really does alter prefrontal function. The research on that is substantial. A 2020 review documented how stress-related neuroplasticity reshapes the very architecture of circuits involved in emotional regulation and executive control. A 2025 review confirmed that chronic stress produces measurable structural and functional changes in the prefrontal cortex across the lifespan. So the biology is real. The question is whether we are applying it correctly. Huijsmans dietoine. Here is where it gets more complicated and more honest. Most of the high-profile neuroscience cited in this conversation did not study people who are actually poor. It studied people who were made to feel poor, temporarily, in a lab. A 2019 neuroimaging study that became widely referenced in this space induced a scarcity mindset in participants by framing a consumer decision task as resource-limited. Brain activity shifted. Neural processing in regions associated with value and decision-making looked different under that condition. The researchers concluded that a scarcity mindset alters neural processing underlying consumer decisions. But notice the sleight of hand that happens when it enters popular discourse. A scarcity mindset, an experimentally induced cognitive frame held for the duration of a lab session, becomes evidence about the brains of people living with financial scarcity as a daily, chronic, years-long condition. Those are not the same thing, not even close. This is the measurement trap. The lab can induce a feeling. It cannot replicate a life. And the gap between those two things is where a lot of the confident claims quietly fall apart. A 2022 longitudinal study using data from a large aging cohort tried to address this more carefully, looking at real-world financial circumstances and decision-making quality over time. What it found was more nuanced. There were individual differences in how financial strain affected decision-making, and the relationship was not as clean or universal as the lab-based framing suggested. The scarcity hypothesis received partial support, not confirmation. So the mainstream narrative contains real neuroscience, real findings, and a genuinely important insight. But it has been compressed into a cleaner story than the data actually supports. And that compression has consequences, because the people this research is supposed to help deserve precision, not a polished narrative. Let us be specific about what the evidence does and does not establish on the neuroscience of chronic stress. The case is strong. Research published in 2025 traced how sustained stress exposure produces dendritic retraction in prefrontal neurons, reduces synaptic density, and impairs the kind of top-down cognitive control that underlies deliberate financial planning. This is not metaphor. It is structural change at the cellular level, and it is reversible, partly through interventions like aerobic exercise, which recent research has shown can restore cognitive function affected by stress-related neuroplasticity. That matters. It means the brain is not simply broken by scarcity. It is responding adaptively, if painfully. And those adaptations are not permanent on decision-making under scarcity specifically. A 2015 study offered one of the cleaner demonstrations of the scarcity effect on value framing. When people feel they are operating under constraint, they assess trade-offs differently. They become more sensitive to immediate costs. They narrow their attention. The researchers described this as scarcity framing value, the cognitive environment of not enough changes what things seem worth. This is a real phenomenon, and it makes evolutionary sense. A brain that cannot afford to be wrong prioritizes the near-term threat over the distant opportunity. That is not dysfunction. That might be the correct response to an environment where missing this month's rent is more immediately dangerous than missing a retirement contribution. But here's what the evidence does not prove. It does not prove that people in financial scarcity are reliably making worse decisions than they would with more resources. Some research suggests the opposite, that scarcity sharpens attention to the things that matter most at the cost of attention to everything else. The framing of impaired judgment assumes we know what the correct decision would be. In conditions of genuine scarcity, the calculus is genuinely different. The adolescent decision-making literature offers a useful parallel here. A 2021 systematic review found that what looks like impaired decision-making in high-stress adolescent populations often reflects rational responses to environments with different risk profiles. Not cognitive deficit, but cognitive adaptation. The same interpretive question applies to financial stress. What we can say with confidence. Chronic financial stress alters brain function in measurable ways. What remains genuinely contested, whether those alterations uniformly impair decision quality, or whether they represent a different kind of rationality that standard lab measures were not built to detect. So what does this mean for you, specifically for the financial decisions you face under pressure? First, the mechanism is real, even if the narrative has been oversimplified. If you have ever noticed that you make worse financial choices when money is tight, that you impulse buy when anxious, avoid opening bank statements, feel paralyzed when you most need to act, that is not a character flaw. There is a neurological substrate to that experience. Your brain genuinely processes information differently under sustained financial stress. But the second thing is equally important. You are not simply broken by the experience of scarcity. The research does not actually support that conclusion. What it supports is that your brain has prioritized differently, which means understanding the mechanism gives you something to work with. Not a diagnosis, but a map. There is a Jungian way to read this that I find genuinely useful. Money is a mirror. The avoidance, the paralysis, the short-term thinking under financial stress. These are not just cortisol. They often reflect something older, something about what we believe we deserve, what we think is possible for us, what we learned about scarcity before we ever had our own bank account. The neuroscience explains the wiring, but the wiring runs deeper than stress hormones. And here is the temporal reframe worth sitting with. Most of the financial decisions that feel urgent right now, the ones your stressed brain is treating as existential, will not register from 20 years out. Some will matter enormously. Most will be invisible. The difficulty is that a brain under scarcity cannot easily access that perspective. That is precisely what the research confirms, which is why naming the state matters more than resolving it. There is a tension I have not resolved, and I am not sure it can be resolved cleanly. The scarcity impairs cognition narrative is useful. It generates empathy. It pushes back against the idea that poor financial decisions are simply moral failures. It has moved policy conversations in directions that seem genuinely more humane, but it also risks something. If we compress the science into a story where financial stress reliably breaks judgment, we may be replacing one kind of condescension with another, one that says you cannot help it, your brain is impaired. The actual evidence is more respectful than that. It says your brain is responding. The response has costs, and the costs are real but not total.
Before we leave, simply small.
The question I keep returning to is this: what would financial advice and financial systems look like if they were built around brains that are adapting under pressure rather than brains that are simply failing? I do not have that answer, but I think it is the right question. The research behind this video draws from European child and adolescent psychiatry, psychological science, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, Royal Society Open Science, Journal of Environmental Management, Molecular Psychiatry, Brain Research, Sports Medicine, Open. Every claim traces to a published source. Full citations are in the description below. If the way this channel thinks about neuroscience resonates with you, subscribing helps this work reach people who'd appreciate it. New videos on the science of mind every week.